Welcome to Life Stories, where every tale is a journey of love, resilience, and hope. In today's story, we delve into the heart of Willow Creek Manor, a place once shrouded in despair and betrayal, now transformed into a beacon of community and unity. Follow Alexander Thornton and his family as they navigate the twists and turns of uncovering painful truths, fighting for justice, and rebuilding not just a home, but a legacy that inspires change. Stay with us to discover how courage and compassion can turn challenges into opportunities. Don't forget to subscribe to begin today's story with Life Stories. When I received the letter, I was seated in the corner of my bustling New York office, surrounded by towering stacks of contracts and the constant hum of productivity. The letter, plain and unassuming, had come through the hands of an old family lawyer I hadn't spoken to in years. Its contents were brief but urgent, pulling me back to a world I thought I had left behind, the world of Willow Creek Manor. My childhood home nestled in Charleston, South Carolina. The words inside were hauntingly direct. My father, Henry Thornton, was in trouble. The man who had raised me with unwavering kindness and a quiet strength now needed me. Though the letter offered no specifics, it wasn't a plea for help in his handwriting, nor did it come with the warmth of his voice, but it was enough to compel me to act. When I arrived at Willow Creek Manor, the house that once stood as a symbol of grandeur and family pride now looked like a shadow of itself. The sprawling estate was overgrown, the windows dull, and the once pristine white columns weathered by neglect. It mirrored the condition of its current master, my father, who sat hunched in the dimly lit library, a room that had once been filled with lively conversations and the comforting scent of aged books. My heart ached at the sight of him. Henry Thornton, the man who had taught me to believe in hard work and integrity, looked frail. His once vibrant presence was subdued, his frame thinner than I remembered, and his eyes hollowed by years of what I would soon learn was abuse. He looked up at me, a flicker of recognition sparking in his weary gaze. But it was immediately swallowed by shame. "You shouldn't have come, Michael," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's too late." His words stirred something deep within me, a mixture of guilt, anger, and an overwhelming need to protect him. It was clear that my father, the man who had always been a pillar of strength for me, was now the one who needed saving. It didn't take long for me to understand the cause of his deterioration. My stepmother, Vanessa Blackwood, had wielded her influence over him with calculated cruelty. Vanessa was everything Henry wasn't: manipulative, self-serving, and cold. I had never liked her, even as a boy, but I never imagined the extent of her darkness. She had not only isolated my father but had coerced him into signing over Willow Creek Manor, leaving him at her mercy. She said it was for my own good, my father admitted one evening as we sat in the kitchen. His hands shook as he wrapped them around a steaming mug of tea I had prepared. I didn't want to fight. I thought maybe she'd keep the house for the family. I couldn't hide my frustration. "Dad, how could you trust her? Vanessa isn't." I stopped myself, not wanting to hurt him further, though the bitterness in my voice betrayed my restraint. He looked at me then, his eyes clouded with regret. "When you're tired, Michael, when you've fought for so long, you start to believe the lies. Especially when they promise peace." The days that followed were a whirlwind of revelations. It turned out Vanessa's treachery extended far beyond the confines of our family. She had manipulated Henry into signing over the estate with promises of financial stability, only to drain its accounts and plan to sell Willow Creek Manor to the highest bidder. The house that had been in our family for generations was at the brink of slipping into the hands of strangers. But what struck me most was how Vanessa had stripped Henry of more than just material things. She had taken his dignity, feeding off his vulnerability, and it was unbearable to see how much it had diminished him. One evening, I found him sitting by the fireplace, staring into the embers. "She said I deserved this," he murmured, "for not being strong enough, for failing as a husband, a father." Those words broke something in me. I knelt beside him, grasping his frail hands. You didn't fail, Dad. If anyone failed, it was me for not being here when you needed me. He shook his head, the smallest ghost of a smile on his lips. No, Michael. You've done well for yourself. You've built something you can be proud of. I didn't want to burden you with this. But I knew better now. Family wasn't about convenience or self-preservation, it was about showing up. Especially when it was hard. I resolved then and there to fight for him. For us. And for the legacy of Willow Creek Manor. Vanessa, of course, didn't take kindly to my return. The first time we crossed paths, she stood in the doorway of the dining room, her figure impeccably poised as though she hadn't a care in the world. Her smile was venomous, and her tone was saccharine when she greeted me. Michael, how nice of you to visit. I didn't think you'd bother with this old house anymore. Her condescension didn't faze me. I'm here for my father, I said plainly, meeting her gaze with unflinching resolve. Vanessa laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. Your father doesn't need saving, dear. He's quite content. I could see the challenge in her eyes. The dare for me to dig deeper, to try and uncover the truth she had buried so carefully. And I knew I would. No matter how long it took or how much it cost. I would uncover the full extent of her betrayal and reclaim what was ours. That night, I stayed in the guest room, the one I had used as a boy during summers at Willow Creek Manor. The walls still bore faint marks of the posters I had once taped there, remnants of a simpler time. As I lay awake, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, I felt the weight of the task ahead. This was no longer about bricks and mortar, nor was it about money. This was about family, about the bonds that tether us to one another, even when life frays those connections to their breaking point. And it was about standing up to those who seek to exploit love and trust for their own gain. I made a silent promise to myself that night. Whatever it took, I would restore my father's dignity and the legacy of Willow Creek Manor. But more importantly, I would remind him and myself that no darkness could ever extinguish the light of a family that refuses to give up on each other. The next morning, the air in Willow Creek Manor felt heavier, as if the house itself bore witness to the secrets buried within its walls. After a sleepless night of contemplation, I knew it was time to take action. The warmth of the South Carolina sun filtered through the tall windows as I resolved to learn everything about Vanessa Blackwood's schemes. No matter how deeply I had to dig. My first step was to contact an old college friend, Marcus Kane, who had made a name for himself as a private investigator. Marcus was a straight shooter with a sharp mind and a knack for unearthing truths hidden beneath layers of deceit. It didn't take much to convince him to take the case. His voice on the phone was calm but determined, the way it always was when he was in work mode. Michael, if Vanessa's up to what you think she is, we'll find it, he assured me. But I'll need time and access to whatever records or documents your father has. The challenge, of course, was that my father hadn't kept meticulous records. His trust in Vanessa had been unwavering, leaving him blind to the financial and legal tangles she had woven. I began poring over what little paperwork remained in the manor. Each bank statement and property ledger offering fragmented glimpses into the years Vanessa had siphoned away our family's legacy. As I worked, I couldn't shake the memory of her face during our brief confrontation, her confidence unnerving, her disdain palpable. She knew I was no match for her manipulative charm. Or so she thought. What she underestimated was my resolve. I had spent years clawing my way to success in the corporate world, navigating boardroom battles that demanded grit and determination. Vanessa may have had her claws in my father, but she had no idea what she was up against now. When Marcus called a week later, his findings sent a chill down my spine. Michael, she's more dangerous than we thought, he said. Her real name isn't even Vanessa Blackwood, it's Vanessa Lark. She's been married twice before, both times to men with substantial wealth. And guess what? Both estates were liquidated shortly after their deaths. The implication was clear. Vanessa wasn't just manipulative, She was a predator. Someone who thrived on exploiting the vulnerabilities of others for personal gain. But Marcus wasn't finished. There's more, he added grimly. Vanessa's been working with a network of people, lawyers, appraisers, and real estate agents who specialize in targeting families like yours. This isn't just about the manor. She's running a scheme that spans across state lines. The magnitude of her betrayal left me momentarily speechless. Vanessa had turned our family into pawns in her larger game, stripping my father of not only his dignity but also the heritage he had spent a lifetime protecting. But one detail Marcus uncovered cut deeper than all the rest. There's a clause in the deed to Willow Creek Manor, Marcus explained. It states that the property must remain in the Thornton bloodline. Vanessa's only claim to the estate hinges on your father's ownership and, by extension, yours. It was a glimmer of hope. But Vanessa had anticipated this. When I confronted her again, armed with Marcus's findings, she unleashed her most vicious weapon yet. Bloodline, she said with a venomous smile. Are you sure you even qualify? Michael, do you really think you're Henry Thornton's son? The accusation landed like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The thought had never crossed my mind. Not once in my 35 years of life. I had always been proud of the man who raised me, the man whose quiet strength and unyielding kindness had shaped me. Vanessa's words felt like an attempt to unravel the very foundation of my identity. Later that night, I confronted my father. Is it true? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Am I not your biological son? He didn't deny it. Instead, his face crumpled with regret. Michael, I never wanted you to find out this way, he began. Your mother and I, we couldn't have children. We adopted you when you were just a baby, but none of that ever mattered to me. You are my son in every way that counts. I could see the pain in his eyes, the fear that he had somehow let me down. But the truth was, his confession only solidified what I already knew deep in my heart. Blood didn't define family. Love did. She's using this against us. Dad, I said, trying to steady my voice. She thinks she can strip me of my claim to the manor because of it. My father's hand trembled as he reached for mine. Then prove her wrong, he said. Not just for me, but for yourself. Willow Creek isn't about her schemes or her lies. It's about everything we've built as a family. His words reignited the fire within me. Vanessa might have thought she held all the cards. But she underestimated the bond that tied my father and me together, a bond that couldn't be undone by a mere twist of biology. As Marcus delved deeper into Vanessa's network, I began preparing for the battle ahead. It wasn't just about reclaiming the property anymore. It was about reclaiming our dignity, our name, and everything Willow Creek Manor represented. And for that, I was willing to fight with every ounce of strength I had. Vanessa's games were far from over. But she had awakened a determination in me that she couldn't anticipate. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But I wasn't going to stop until the truth prevailed and until Willow Creek Manor was back where it belonged. The days that followed were a blur of strategy meetings and sleepless nights. I had Marcus investigating every angle of Vanessa's operation. From her fraudulent manipulation of my father to the deeper, more insidious criminal network she seemed to be running. My father, Henry, despite his frailty, insisted on being part of the fight. It was as if the act of standing up to Vanessa was slowly reviving the man I once knew. She's underestimated us, he said one evening, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. Vanessa thinks she's untouchable. That arrogance will be her downfall. His words spurred me on. I threw myself into the work with a renewed sense of purpose. With the help of Marcus and a legal team I'd assembled, we began to build a case against Vanessa. Every document we uncovered, every witness we contacted, added another piece to the puzzle. The picture it painted was one of breathtaking greed and cruelty. Vanessa's schemes weren't limited to our family, she had targeted others, leaving a trail of financial ruin in her wake. But Vanessa was not one to back down without a fight. As soon as she realized we were closing in, she struck back. One morning, as I was reviewing a stack of financial records, my assistant burst into the room, her face pale. "Michael," she said, holding out a tablet. "You need to see this." On the screen was a breaking news headline: Thornton Enterprises under investigation for fraud. My stomach dropped as I skimmed the article. Vanessa had somehow orchestrated an anonymous tip to federal authorities, accusing me of embezzlement and corporate misconduct. It was a direct attack on my reputation, one designed to destabilize me at the very moment I needed to be strongest. The accusations were baseless, of course, but the damage was immediate. Investors started pulling out of projects, and board members called emergency meetings to express their concerns. I spent hours on calls with my legal team, crafting statements and gathering evidence to clear my name. The toll was immense, but I refused to let it break me. "She's trying to distract you," Marcus said during one of our late-night calls. "She wants you too busy defending yourself to focus on her." He was right. Vanessa was playing a dangerous game of misdirection. But I wouldn't allow her to win. I doubled down on my efforts, dividing my time between countering the false accusations and pushing forward with our investigation. My father, too, rose to the occasion, proving that even in his weakened state, he was still a force to be reckoned with. "She thinks she's got us on the ropes," he said one afternoon as we worked side by side in the Manor's library. "But she doesn't understand what it means to fight for something real." The turning point came when Marcus uncovered a critical piece of evidence: a series of emails between Vanessa and her associates detailing their plans to sell Willow Creek Manor under the table, bypassing the clause that required the property to remain in the Thornton bloodline. It was the smoking gun we needed. Proof not only of her intent to defraud my father but also of her broader criminal activities. Armed with this new information, we filed an injunction to halt any sale of the property. At the same time, we worked with federal authorities to expose the extent of Vanessa's network. The investigation revealed a tangled web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and bribery schemes that reached far beyond our family. The legal battle was grueling, but it brought our family closer together. My uncle, Robert, who had initially distanced himself from the conflict, returned to offer his support. Seeing him and my father reconcile after years of estrangement was a silver lining in an otherwise dark time. It reminded me of the resilience of family bonds, even when they'd been tested to their limits. "You were right, Michael," Robert said one evening as we shared a quiet moment on the Manor's porch. "I should have been here from the start. This is my family, too, and I'm not going to let her destroy it." Despite our progress, Vanessa remained defiant. She appeared at court hearings with her trademark smugness, her confidence never wavering. But I could see the cracks forming. The walls were closing in, and she knew it. Her once loyal associates were turning against her, offering testimony in exchange for leniency. The most poignant moment came when we presented the deed to Willow Creek Manor in court, along with the clause that guaranteed its inheritance within the Thornton family. Vanessa's attempt to challenge my legitimacy as Henry's son was swiftly dismissed. The court ruled in our favor, recognizing not only my legal right to the estate but also the bond that transcended bloodlines. That evening, as we returned to the manor, my father turned to me, his eyes shining with emotion. "We did it, son," he said. "We took back what's ours." But it wasn't just about reclaiming the property. It was about reclaiming our sense of purpose, our identity as a family. The battle against Vanessa had tested us in ways we never anticipated. But it had also reminded us of what truly mattered: love, resilience, and the courage to stand up for what's right. The war wasn't over. Vanessa's schemes had left scars that would take time to heal, but for the first time in months, I felt a sense of hope. Willow Creek Manor was ours again, not just in name but in spirit. And as we stood together on the front steps, watching the sunset over the grounds, I knew we were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The night we finally confronted Vanessa Blackwood was one I'll never forget. The air outside Willow Creek Manor was thick with tension. A storm brewing both in the skies above and within the halls of the estate. My father and I stood in the shadows of the old oaks, waiting for the signal from Marcus. The plan was meticulous. Every detail accounted for. Still, my heart pounded in my chest. This was the culmination of months of effort. And there was no room for error. The house loomed ahead, its grandeur tarnished by the years of deceit that Vanessa had wrought within its walls. My father, Henry, leaned against the trunk of a tree, his face illuminated by the soft glow of moonlight. Despite his age and the trials he'd endured, there was a steely resolve in his eyes. "This is it. Son," he said quietly. "This is where we take back what's ours." A crackle in my earpiece brought Marcus's voice. "All clear. She's in the study with her associates. They've just finalized the sale agreement." The words sent a jolt through me. Vanessa's arrogance knew no bounds. Even with the legal case looming over her, she'd pressed forward with her schemes, convinced she could outmaneuver us. But this time, she'd underestimated just how far we were willing to go to stop her. We moved swiftly, entering the manor through a side door. The familiar creak of the floorboards under my feet stirred memories of a happier time when this house had been a sanctuary for our family. Now, every corner seemed to carry the weight of betrayal. My father placed a hand on my shoulder as we reached the door to the study. A silent reminder that we were in this together. Inside, Vanessa's voice dripped with smug confidence. "By this time next week, the deed will be transferred, and the funds will be in our accounts. All that's left is for our friend in the legal department to finalize the paperwork." Pushing the door open, we stepped into the room, our presence silencing the conversation. Vanessa's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she masked her surprise with a condescending smile. Well, she said, her voice syrupy with false charm. "The prodigal son and his doting father. Come to wish me luck on my new venture." I didn't bother responding. Instead, I held up the folder of evidence we'd painstakingly gathered. "It's over. Vanessa. We know everything, the fake companies, the bribes, the offshore accounts. And so does the FBI." Her smile faltered. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual bravado. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Michael. Do you think this changes anything? I've built an empire. You can't touch me." Marcus's voice came through my earpiece again. "Agents are moving in." I took a step closer, my gaze never leaving hers. "Your empire is built on lies, Vanessa. And it's crumbling around you." The sound of sirens cut through the night air, followed by the telltale flash of red and blue lights outside the windows. Vanessa's associates began to panic, their bravado evaporating as federal agents stormed the room. One by one, they were handcuffed and led away, their protests drowned out by the chaos. Vanessa, however, remained defiant. Even as the agents approached her, she stood tall, her eyes locked on mine. "You think you've won," she hissed. "You have no idea what's coming." But her bravado cracked as she was led away, her gaze darting around the room as if searching for an escape. I stood frozen, watching as the woman who had brought so much pain to our family was finally held accountable. It should have felt like a victory, but all I felt was a profound sense of exhaustion. As the last of the agents left, the room fell silent. My father and I stood in the study, the weight of what had just happened settling over us. He sank into a chair, his hands trembling as he ran them through his hair. "She's gone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's finally over." I nodded. But my thoughts were elsewhere. My gaze fell on the fireplace, where a faint glimmer of metal caught my eye. Moving closer, I crouched down and ran my hand along the edge of the hearth. With a faint click, a hidden compartment sprang open. Inside was a stack of yellowed papers, their edges brittle with age. On top was the original deed to Willow Creek Manor. But beneath it was something even more intriguing, a letter addressed to my dear descendants. The handwriting was elegant. The ink faded but still legible. As I unfolded the letter, my father leaned over my shoulder. The words within spoke of legacy, of the Thornton family's commitment to integrity and justice. It was a reminder of the values that had guided us through generations. A beacon of hope in the darkest times. Tears welled in my father's eyes as he read. "Your great-grandfather wrote this," he said softly. "He wanted us to remember what it means to be a Thornton." The moment was bittersweet. We had reclaimed the manor. But it came at a cost. The scars Vanessa had left would take time to heal. But as I looked at my father, I saw a glimmer of the man he used to be, the strength, the resilience, the love. Standing there in the study, with the letter in one hand and the deed in the other, I felt a sense of closure. We had faced betrayal, fought for justice, and rediscovered the bond that made us a family. The battle for Willow Creek Manor was over, but its legacy was just beginning to take shape. The morning after Vanessa's arrest, the manor was eerily quiet. Sunlight streamed through the large windows of Willow Creek Manor, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. The storm of the previous night had passed, leaving the grounds soaked but glistening under a clear blue sky. It felt like the house itself was breathing a sigh of relief, its walls no longer bearing the weight of secrets and deceit. My father and I sat in the dining room. The original deed to the estate spread out before us. The edges of the parchment were frayed, and the ink had faded in places, but it was still legible. Next to it lay the letter addressed to my dear descendants, written in the flowing script of my great-grandfather, Ezra Thornton. We hadn't yet read the letter in its entirety. The chaos of the previous night had left little room for reflection. But now, in the calm of the morning, it felt like the right time. My father adjusted his glasses and carefully unfolded the delicate paper. His hands trembled slightly, not with fear or exhaustion, but with reverence. "Shall we?" he asked, looking at me with a small smile. I nodded, and he began to read aloud. The letter spoke of Ezra's vision for the Thornton family, a commitment to justice, compassion, and community. He wrote of the challenges he had faced in his time, powerful adversaries who sought to exploit the vulnerable, and the difficult decisions he had made to protect what was right. "True wealth," my father read, his voice steady, "is not measured in gold or land but in the positive impact we leave on the lives of others." The words resonated deeply, a reminder of what we had fought so hard to reclaim. Ezra's letter wasn't just a record of his beliefs, it was a call to action. A challenge to future generations to rise above greed and self-interest. As my father read, I couldn't help but think about how far we had come. Willow Creek Manor, once a symbol of despair and betrayal, now felt like it was being restored to its rightful purpose. But there was still much work to be done. Not just within these walls, but beyond them. When my father finished reading, he placed the letter down and looked at me. His eyes, though weary, held a renewed sense of purpose. "This house was always meant to be more than a home," he said. "It was meant to be a foundation, a place from which we could build something greater." I leaned back in my chair, letting his words sink in. "What do you think Ezra would want us to do now?" I asked. He thought for a moment before answering. "I think he'd want us to ensure that what happened here, what Vanessa did, never happens to anyone else. He'd want us to use this place as a force for good." The idea struck a chord. For years, I had thought of Willow Creek Manor as a relic of the past, a monument to a family legacy that no longer held meaning. But now, with the truth revealed and the estate back in our hands, it felt like we had been given a second chance, not just to rebuild the manor, but to redefine what it stood for. Our conversation was interrupted by Marcus, who entered the room with a folder in hand. His usually calm demeanor was tinged with excitement. "I thought you'd want to see this," he said, placing the folder on the table. Inside were documents detailing the extent of Vanessa's criminal enterprise, shell companies, offshore accounts, and bribes paid to officials. But what caught my attention was a separate file, marked Community Impact. It contained records of families and businesses that had been devastated by Vanessa's schemes, people who had lost everything because of her greed. My father's expression darkened as he flipped through the pages. "This isn't just about us," he said quietly. "She's left a trail of destruction in her wake." I nodded, feeling a knot of anger and sadness in my chest. "Then we need to do something about it." Over the next few days, the house buzzed with activity. Contractors arrived to assess the damage and begin repairs, while my father and I turned the study into a makeshift command center. We worked late into the night, poring over documents and making plans. Our goal was ambitious but clear: to transform Willow Creek Manor into a hub for community restoration. We envisioned a place where people could come to rebuild their lives, where underprivileged youth could access education and mentorship, where adults could learn new skills, and where families could find support and resources. The manor would no longer be just a home, it would be a sanctuary, a beacon of hope for those in need. Uncle Robert joined us in our efforts, eager to make amends for his past mistakes. He took on the role of mentoring young entrepreneurs, teaching them the importance of ethics in business. It was his way of giving back, of ensuring that the lessons he had learned the hard way would benefit others. As the days turned into weeks, the transformation of Willow Creek Manor began to take shape. The overgrown gardens were cleared and turned into community spaces, while the once abandoned rooms were filled with the sounds of laughter and learning. It was as if the house itself was coming back to life, shedding the darkness of the past and embracing a brighter future. One evening, as the sun set over the newly planted gardens, my father and I stood on the front steps, watching the activity unfold. Volunteers bustled about. Children played on the freshly installed playground, and families gathered in the courtyard. "This is what it was always meant to be," my father said, his voice filled with pride. I nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long and painful, but standing there, surrounded by the fruits of our labor, I knew it had been worth it. Willow Creek Manor was more than just a house, it was a testament to the strength of family, the power of resilience, and the enduring legacy of doing what was right. The discovery of the letter and the hidden compartment had set this transformation in motion. But it was the choices we made afterward that gave it meaning. The story of Willow Creek Manor wasn't just about reclaiming a house, it was about reclaiming a purpose, and in doing so, we had found a way to honor our past while building a better future. The next chapter of Willow Creek Manor's story began with determination and a clear vision: to transform the estate into a sanctuary for healing and hope. The scars of Vanessa's schemes, both physical and emotional, were not just ours to bear, they extended to the families, communities, and individuals she had exploited. With this realization, we understood our responsibility went far beyond restoring our family's dignity. It was about restoring the lives of those who had suffered alongside us. The repairs to the manor began in earnest. What had once been a symbol of decay and deceit was slowly becoming a place of light and purpose. Teams of workers replaced broken windows, repaired crumbling walls, and polished the woodwork until it gleamed. The gardens, once overgrown and wild, were meticulously cultivated into thriving community spaces. Roses and tulips bloomed alongside vegetable beds and herb patches, symbolizing a balance of beauty and utility. Inside the manor, the transformation was even more profound. The old ballroom, which had echoed with loneliness and silence during Vanessa's reign, was converted into a multi-purpose community hall. We envisioned it as a space for workshops, celebrations, and gatherings, a place where people could come together and rebuild their lives. My father took a special interest in the library, which he lovingly restored as an educational center. Shelves once filled with dusty tomes now housed books on entrepreneurship, ethics, and community building. In those early days of restoration, our family rediscovered a sense of unity. My father, despite his initial hesitation, embraced his role as the steward of Willow Creek Manor with renewed vigor. He oversaw every detail of the transformation, ensuring that Ezra's vision of compassion and integrity was honored in every corner of the estate. His resilience was inspiring, and I began to see him in a new light, not just as my father, but as a man who had faced unimaginable challenges and emerged stronger. Uncle Robert, too, found his place in this new chapter. His past mistakes had weighed heavily on him, but rather than letting them define him, he used them as a source of strength. He developed a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, teaching them about ethical business practices and the importance of integrity. Watching him work with these bright-eyed individuals, I saw a man who had not only redeemed himself but was actively shaping the future. One afternoon, as we sat on the veranda overlooking the gardens, Robert shared his thoughts. "You know," he said, swirling the tea in his cup, "I used to think success was about power and wealth. But seeing these kids, watching them grow and thrive, that's the real reward. It's humbling." I nodded, understanding his sentiment all too well. The pursuit of wealth and status had once consumed me as well. But the journey we had embarked upon had reshaped my priorities. Seeing the joy on a child's face as they explored the playground or the pride in a mother's eyes as she shared her newfound skills, it was worth more than any corporate achievement. The community around us responded to our efforts with cautious optimism at first. But as the programs began to take root, their trust and engagement grew. We established partnerships with local organizations to provide job training and mentorship opportunities. The community gardens became a source of fresh produce for nearby food banks, and the educational programs helped children and adults alike discover new possibilities. One evening, I met Janet Baker, a single mother who had been struggling to provide for her young son. With the help of our job training program, she secured a position at a nearby clinic. Her gratitude was evident in every word she spoke, but it was the transformation in her son, Tommy, that struck me the most. The shy, withdrawn boy I had first met was now brimming with confidence, eagerly participating in after-school activities. As the weeks turned into months, the manor began to hum with life. Volunteers came and went, each bringing their unique skills and energy. The community center hosted everything from financial literacy workshops to art classes for children. The once empty halls of Willow Creek Manor were now filled with laughter, conversation, and a sense of purpose. Amidst this flurry of activity, my father and I often found ourselves reflecting on how far we had come. One evening, as we stood in the library, he turned to me and said, "Alex, do you remember what you said when we first started this journey? You asked me what Ezra would want us to do." Looking at this, he gestured to the bustling room beyond the library doors. "I think we've found the answer." His words stayed with me. The transformation of Willow Creek Manor was not just a physical one, it was a reflection of the deeper changes within our family. The pain and betrayal we had endured had not broken us. Instead, it had forged a stronger bond and a clearer sense of purpose. The work was far from over. Every day brought new challenges, from funding hurdles to navigating the complex needs of the community. But for the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. We were not just rebuilding a house, we were building a legacy, one rooted in love, empathy, and a commitment to creating a better future. As the sun set over Willow Creek Manor, casting a golden glow over the newly planted gardens, I felt a deep sense of peace. This place, once a symbol of despair, was now a beacon of hope. And as I stood there with my father and uncle, I knew we had only just begun. Together, we were turning a vision into reality, proving that even in the face of adversity, transformation was possible. As the transformation of Willow Creek Manor continued, we realized that our vision couldn't end with our family estate. The work we had begun was far too important to be confined to the grounds of one home. The community programs we had established were making a tangible difference, and their success inspired us to think bigger. It was time to take what we had learned and apply it on a broader scale. The idea of expanding our efforts nationally began as a simple conversation over dinner. What if we could replicate this? I asked my father and uncle one evening. What if other communities could benefit from the same support and opportunities we've provided here? My father, ever the cautious optimist, leaned back in his chair and considered the question. It's a noble goal, he said. But scaling something like this is no small feat. We'd need resources, partnerships, and, most importantly, trust. Uncle Robert, however, was immediately on board. We've already laid the foundation, he said, his enthusiasm unmistakable. What we've done here can be a model. We just need to find the right communities and the right people to lead the way. With that, the Thornton Foundation was born. Its mission was clear: to bring the principles of community restoration, ethical development, and empowerment to cities across the country. Detroit, Chicago, and Atlanta were chosen as the first pilot locations, each facing unique challenges but brimming with potential. In Detroit, the foundation set its sights on a struggling neighborhood with a dilapidated community center at its heart. The building, with its peeling paint and boarded-up windows, was a far cry from the grandeur of Willow Creek Manor. But it held a similar promise. Maria Rodriguez, a passionate local organizer, became our point person. Her deep ties to the community and her unwavering determination made her the perfect partner. People here have been let down too many times, Maria told me during one of my visits. Empty promises and failed projects have made them skeptical. If we want to succeed, we have to show them that we're different. In Chicago, the challenges were more political. A local alderman, Alderman Jenkins, was skeptical of our intentions. We've seen outsiders come in with big ideas before, he told me during our first meeting. And it's the people who live here who end up paying the price. To win him over, I shared our story, how Willow Creek Manor had gone from a place of pain to a hub of hope. How our work was rooted in listening to and empowering the community. Jenkins remained wary, but he agreed to let us hold a town hall meeting to present our plans directly to the residents. In Atlanta, the issue was staffing. We struggled to find local leaders who shared our vision and values. It was a humbling reminder that no amount of funding or good intentions could replace the importance of grassroots connections. After weeks of searching, we finally assembled a team of passionate individuals eager to bring about change. Despite these challenges, the work progressed. Each city presented its own set of obstacles, but it also offered invaluable lessons. In Detroit, we learned the power of collaboration as local volunteers and businesses rallied to support the renovation of the community center. In Chicago, we discovered the importance of transparency and open communication in building trust. In Atlanta, we were reminded that finding the right people could make all the difference. As the foundation's work gained momentum, it also began to draw attention. National media outlets covered our efforts, praising the innovative approach of the Thornton Foundation. But with the praise came scrutiny. Critics questioned our motives, accusing us of being a front for corporate interests or of overstepping our bounds as a family-led organization. One morning, I received a call from Marcus, the private investigator who had helped us uncover Vanessa's schemes. "Alex, there's something you need to know," he said. "I've been hearing whispers about a group trying to discredit the foundation. It seems they're connected to some of Vanessa's old associates." The news was a punch to the gut. Even in her absence, Vanessa's shadow loomed large, determined not to let her past deeds derail our mission. We decided to confront the criticism head-on. We invited an independent auditing firm to review the foundation's finances, released detailed reports of our activities, and welcomed journalists to visit our projects and see the work for themselves. But the most powerful step we took was sharing our story. My father, Uncle Robert, and I sat down for a candid interview with a respected journalist. We spoke openly about our family's struggles, the mistakes we had made, and the lessons we had learned. "We're not perfect," I told her, but we're committed to doing what's right, even when it's difficult. The interview had an unexpected impact. Former employees of Vanessa's companies came forward, sharing their own stories of redemption and support for the foundation. Community leaders who had been skeptical of our intentions reached out, eager to collaborate. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. As I stood on the steps of the newly renovated community center in Detroit during its grand opening, I felt a profound sense of hope. The journey had been far from easy, but the progress we had made was undeniable. The crowd that had gathered to celebrate included people from all walks of life: residents, volunteers, local officials, and even some of our critics who had been won over by our actions. This is just the beginning, I told them in my speech. The work we've done here is proof that when we come together, we can achieve incredible things. Willow Creek Manor taught us that change starts with a single step. And now we're taking that step together. The applause that followed was not just for the foundation or for me, it was for the community itself. For the resilience and strength of the people who had made this transformation possible. As I looked out at the faces in the crowd, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. This was more than a mission, it was a movement. One that was just beginning to take shape. The momentum of the Thornton Foundation's national expansion was inspiring. But it was also a constant reminder of the scope of the challenges communities faced. From Detroit to Chicago to Atlanta, each city revealed its unique struggles and triumphs. Yet, there was a common thread: people wanted a chance to rebuild, to thrive, and to reclaim the dignity that had been taken from them. The success of these early initiatives sparked a bold question: could our work extend beyond the borders of the United States? Could the lessons of Willow Creek Manor inspire change on a global scale? It was an idea that took root during a quiet evening at the manor. My father, Uncle Robert, and I were sitting in the library, the crackling of the fireplace the only sound in the room. I had just returned from Atlanta, exhausted but exhilarated by the progress we were making there. This is bigger than us, I said, breaking the silence. What we're doing here, helping people reclaim their communities, empowering them to create sustainable change, this isn't just an American problem. It's universal. My father, always the pragmatic dreamer, nodded thoughtfully. The need is everywhere, Alex, he said. But expanding globally, that's an entirely different challenge. Different cultures, different governments, different resources. We'd have to tread carefully. Uncle Robert leaned forward, his eyes alight with enthusiasm. Carefully, yes. But the foundation we've built is strong. What if we didn't try to replicate ourselves exactly? What if we worked with local leaders to adapt our model to fit their needs? And so, the idea of the Thornton Institute for Ethical Community Development was born. It would be a hub for sharing knowledge, providing training, and supporting communities around the world in their efforts to rebuild and thrive. Rather than impose our methods, we would collaborate, learning as much as we taught. The first step was presenting our vision on an international stage. An invitation to speak at a United Nations panel on sustainable urban development provided the perfect opportunity. The weeks leading up to the event were a whirlwind of preparation. Every statistic, every story, every lesson we had learned was carefully crafted into a presentation that I hoped would resonate. Standing before the gathered dignitaries in the Grand Hall of the United Nations was both humbling and empowering. I began my speech with the story of Willow Creek Manor, describing its journey from a place of despair to a beacon of hope. But I didn't stop there. I spoke of Detroit, Chicago, and Atlanta, the struggles we had faced, the partnerships we had formed, and the lives we had touched. The key to sustainable development, I said, my voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment, is recognizing that true change cannot be imposed. It must come from within. Our role is not to dictate but to support, to empower communities to define their own futures. The response was overwhelming. After the panel, representatives from countries as diverse as Brazil, India, and Kenya approached me, eager to learn more about our work. It was clear that the Thornton Foundation had struck a chord. Communities around the world were searching for solutions that honored their unique identities while addressing shared challenges. Back at Willow Creek Manor, the family gathered to plan the next steps. The excitement was palpable, but so was the sense of responsibility. "This is an incredible opportunity," my father said, his voice tinged with both pride and caution. "But it's also a test. If we're going to do this, we have to do it right." We began by identifying pilot locations, cities and regions where local leaders had already begun the hard work of rebuilding and were seeking support to amplify their efforts. Nairobi, Mumbai, and Rio de Janeiro were among the first. Each brought its own challenges, from navigating complex political landscapes to addressing deep-seated social inequities. To ensure our efforts were collaborative, we hosted workshops at the newly established Thornton Institute. Community leaders from across the globe came to Willow Creek Manor to share their stories, learn from one another, and develop tailored plans for their communities. The manor, once a place of secrecy and isolation, was now a vibrant center of learning and connection. One moment from those workshops stands out vividly. During a session on ethical business practices, a young woman from Kenya named Amina spoke about the challenges her community faced with corrupt local officials and exploitative foreign investors. Her words were raw and powerful, a reminder of why we had started this journey. "You've shown us what's possible," she said, looking directly at me. "But we can't do this alone. We need allies who understand that our struggles are our own but that our victories can be shared." Her words stayed with me as we launched our first international pilot projects. In Nairobi, we supported a local initiative to transform an abandoned school into a community hub. In Mumbai, we partnered with an organization that provided microloans to women starting small businesses. In Rio de Janeiro, we worked with a group reclaiming urban green spaces for community gardens. Each project brought its own lessons, but they all reinforced the same truth: our role was to listen, to learn, and to support, not to lead. The successes we celebrated were not ours but those of the communities we served. One evening, as I walked through the gardens of Willow Creek Manor, I thought of Ezra Thornton. His vision of justice and integrity had guided our family through the darkest times, and now it was shaping a movement that was reaching across oceans. The challenges ahead were immense, but so was the potential. The Thornton legacy, once defined by wealth and power, was now a legacy of hope and empowerment. And as I looked up at the stars, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for my family, for the communities that had trusted us, and for the opportunity to be part of something so much bigger than myself. This was just the beginning. Together, we were building a world where every community could thrive, one step at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over Willow Creek Manor, the air was filled with the hum of life and hope. Children laughed in the gardens, families shared meals in the community center, and the lights of the manor twinkled like stars. Standing on the porch, Alexander Thornton took a deep breath, his heart full of gratitude and purpose. What had started as a fight to reclaim a family home had grown into something far greater: a movement of empowerment, resilience, and justice. The lessons learned from their struggles had not only transformed their family but had also touched lives around the world. Willow Creek Manor had become more than a place, it was a symbol of what was possible when people came together with courage and compassion. As Alexander turned to rejoin his father and Uncle Robert, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Thornton legacy was no longer just about the past, it was about the future. A future built on love, integrity, and the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples of change. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more tales of resilience and inspiration. See you in the next story.